If you just state who you are and your affiliation.
Okay. I'm Matt Piper from the Tribune. What were the concerns about the oversight of Lippert? Why did people say that he needed more oversight?
That's a good question, and we don't know the full details of that. What we have are some employment records, including performance reviews, that suggested at some period of time in the late 1980s, early 1990s, his performance was exceptional, and he was lauded and deserved employment raise and compensation. But something happened within a couple of years thereafter. So by 1993 or so, the records suggested there were concerns about either his behavior or the performance in the laboratory. And a couple of years after that, he separated from the university. And we do not yet have records that detail that separation.
How many? Back in the blue.
Roxanne, KUTV. If these two labs are more connected than what we previously thought, sharing administrative services and also space, then does that mean that the University of Utah is more responsible in this than what we may have originally thought?
Yes. Yes. Our initial impression when we first heard about this was that RMTI was a separately incorporated entity, and that is true. It was a private corporation, but as we've investigated further, we've discovered that a couple of the key medical physicians that were principals in the organization were University of Utah faculty. The facility shared space with a university-owned and operated clinic, and it shared some procedures and oversight. And so we think that the two entities are linked.
In the front here.
How many calls have you received? Brady McCombs with the Associated Press. How many calls have you received to the hotline, and have you identified any other cases where this same thing occurred?
Yes, Brady. We have received calls on the hotline, about 15 to date. We've not identified any other individuals that we think are at risk for a similar situation, but we are working with a couple families that may choose to have paternity testing.
Of the 15, how many have done paternity testing, or have any?
None others at this time, to our knowledge.
Marcus.
Marcus, ABC4 News. What's the reaction of these callers? What are they saying? I mean, are they puzzled? Are they angry? What?
I think puzzlement is certainly one of the common themes. I think that people have 2 points of view about this. You know, this is a very private situation between a couple and their physicians in terms of trying to achieve a child under difficult circumstances. And some patients really have a loving, well-functioning family, and they don't want to know too much more about the biological nature of the family. Others want to know. And that's a fundamental difference of people's feelings about this that we need to respect. Not every patient wants the same thing, and so we're trying to represent the issues of each patient individually.
Max Roth with Fox 13. So have you been able to, you mentioned 2 want to go through paternity testing. What you just said suggests some have just chosen not to. Have you ruled out most of those 15 people who called, that the circumstances would eliminate them from being in this situation?
Yes.
So if this panel of doctors will review some of the practices and the records and that sort of thing pertaining to the case, it's been our understanding that RMTI has no records or very little records that are left. What will they be reviewing?
They'll be reviewing any university records that might be appropriate for that time. So we do have some boxes of old records that were found in storage that they are beginning a review of at this time. We do not believe that we will discover any RMTI records. We believe that the family members destroyed those records after the death of the principal, Dr. Uri, but we continue a search for any records that might be pertinent.
Well, we know the Burnham family has sought to get their records and their file. Has that been discovered at this point?
Not to my knowledge.
Matt?
Would you clarify the period of employment for Lippert at RMTI?
We do not have records of his employment at RMTI. We have discovered some university records that we believe he was employed from about 1988 to 1993 or thereabouts.
Okay.
When you said relevant time period, what is that, the 1984 to 1998?
I think the relevant time period would be the time that he was actually employed by the university in that clinic. So around that 1988 to 93 time frame.
Will there be any attempt to contact other families whose samples were handled by Mr. Lippert?
No. What we're hoping with this event today is to reach out to those individuals who may be worried, who may have had care at that time, and ask them to contact us for more information, counseling, and if they choose, paternity testing. We do not have accurate records that enable us to reach out to those individuals.
Marcus?
Yes, what effect has this had on donors and families wanting to go this route? You've been able to assess that yet?
That's a great question. I don't think I can really answer that. I'm sure that this is a shocking story to all of us, and we want to make sure that people are reassured that the policies and practices today make it inconceivable the same sort of thing could happen today.
Follow-up. So you're relying on a national bank instead of a donor sperm bank. Educate me on this. What's the difference, and is there more protection, or is there more insurances?
Yes, this is a good question. Well, this will be one of the issues that our review committee and our national consultant, the ethicist that I mentioned, will be helping us analyze to say what are the best practices today. We made a decision a number of years ago that the ability of the national sperm banks to have processes that were better protection for patients and have a wider array of donors was superior than what we could do here locally in Utah. So that was one of the reasons we made that change.
A couple more questions before, Wendy, Mr. Downstairs.
Wendy with the Desert News. You're offering free paternity tests. Is there anything else you're doing for these families, specifically the Roman families?
I'm sorry.
Is the U doing anything?
We are in ongoing conversations with Varnum family, and we're trying to meet their goals. We do have a little conflict with them in terms of what they want. They want us to reach out to all the patients who might have been treated at this laboratory, and that's really not feasible, as I've described, because of the lack of records. We don't have names, addresses, phone numbers, that sorts of thing. But we think that this event may be one way to reach out to people, to ask them to come to us if they desire additional information.
How many people are we talking about? Are we talking about thousands, hundreds? I mean, in this time period that you set out today, how many people might have come through these clinics?
I'm sorry, I don't have an exact number, but I would say it's in the hundreds to thousands. Somewhere in, let's just say 1,000 might be an estimate of people who might be affected. But the issue here is the records are incomplete in a way that we don't know how many people who might have visited that lab just had a simple diagnostic test, such as whether their sperm was viable or not, as part of their evaluation for infertility, and how many were actually using that facility for sperm washing in an attempt to have artificial insemination. So those records are not available.
So one more, we have somebody in the back.
Andrew Smarts from KUER Radio. Just to follow up to that, so do you have a sense of the scope of the number of people that could have been affected by this? You talked about 15. Is it limited to those 15, or could it be larger?
We're sure it's not limited to just 15 people that might be affected, and that's why we're reaching out to ask them to contact us if they have concerns. But because of the lack of records, we really don't at this moment have a good idea of the number. That'll be one of the duties of this review committee, to see if we can get to some determination of how many patients might have been treated and in what categories of treatment they were receiving that might have put them at risk for a similar event.
One last question. Did you guys start investigating this in April? Can you clarify what you were doing until it came out via the family?
Yes, it's a very good question. So we were contacted by the family in April, and at that time we began an investigation with our staff. And the staff's initial impression was that RMTI was a company independent of the university. The two principals had passed away, and it was felt early on that there would be no purpose in proceeding with an investigation. As we've learned more, however, as I've described, we do have more information about the relationship of RMTI to the university, and that's why we're at this point today.
So did you kind of restart it after the stories emerged in the news media?
We restarted it really in October, I would say.
When will we learn the results of this investigation? What's the time frame?
We don't know how long it will take to get to the truth of this matter, but we're giving the committee wide latitude in the kinds of things they investigate. We would hope that this review would be completed within 90 days, and we'll keep you updated on their progress.